my name's Caitlin Bandy and this is my channel Bandy's Books, and today we are here to talk June TBR. June is full of so much stuff. I have so many books to talk about, several different readathons and themes, and this might be kind of a noisy, chaotic video because we have this little kitten that we rescued a week ago. We are in the process of bottle feeding her, and then we are going to be adopting her out to a friend who is looking for a new cat. This is Oreo, if you haven't seen pictures of her already, but she is in full play mode right now. When she's awake, she kind of constantly squeaks. And if you're looking for Luna in the video like she usually is, Luna is actually sitting behind the camera right now looking at me with a lot of disdain. She is so tired of this little squeaking kitten at the moment that she's just like, I don't even want to come near you. But they are getting along really well so far. They're very gently sniffing and checking each other out. And I think once this one's a little bit bigger, she'll probably really want to engage and play with Luna. So not only is June a month full of amazing reading, but it is also my birthday month. I was born on June 21st, the first day of summer. And so I always really look forward to my June TBR. I like to try to pack it with books that I'm really gonna enjoy reading. And there's some really strong themes this month. There are lots of different readathons going on. It's Pride Month, all of which I wanna try and read at least a little bit for. So let's go ahead and break it down. Before we jump into the fantastic readathons and my Pride TBR, I wanted to talk about one specific book. So me and Jamie Kate recently started the Backlist Book Club. This is a bi-monthly book club that is going to be featuring books that are published at least 5 years ago. We're trying to focus on books that have been sitting on our shelves for a long time that we're just not really doing a great job of moving through for whatever reason. The idea for this book club came up because we had both had The Bone Clocks by David Mitchell sitting on our TBRs for a really long time, and we'd been putting it off. So we decided that we would buddy read it together in an effort to like move it off the shelves. And we were like, we should do this more often. Maybe we should make a book club about this. There's probably a lot of other people that have this same exact issue. So June is the first month that we are hosting this book club. We ran a poll in May to see what our read would be. The overwhelming winner of the poll was My Year of Rest and Relaxation by Otessa Moshfegh. So this is the book that we will be reading for our very first episode of the Backlist Book Club. And at the end of June somewhere, Jamie and I are gonna sit down and host a live streamed discussion about this book where anyone that's read along with us can participate in it, talk about it, tell us if they loved it or hated it, and it should be a lot of fun. This is a shocking and strangely tender story of a young woman's efforts to duck the ills of the world with the help of one of the worst psychiatrists in the annals of literature. Otessa Moshfegh is somebody that I consider kind of a subversive writer. She tends to pick themes that are controversial, things that we don't really say a lot. And because of that, I feel like I hear a lot of really mixed reviews of her books. It's not because they're badly written, but just because of the subject matter. A lot of people, it's like either you relate to it or you don't. So I'm really curious to see where I'm gonna stand with this particular book. So hopefully this is a book that interests you too. And if it does, feel free to join us and look for that live stream discussion towards the end of the month. I will definitely be putting up a post with the date and time and all of that real soon. I am gonna start with a couple readathons and then I'm gonna get into my Pride list TBR because the vast majority of my reading for this month is for Pride, but I do have a small stack for a couple different readathons. So first up, we're gonna talk about June on the Range. This is hosted every year by Michael K. Vaughan, and he brings on an assortment of wonderful booktubers to help him co-host. Just to name a few, we have Steve Donahue, we have Greg at Another Bibliophile Reads, MJ at Reading This Life, and Ollie over at Criminal. This is not even the full list of hosts. This is seriously a star-studded event, and it seems to get bigger every single year. So Westerns are not my typical preference for reading. In general, I maybe read a Western a year if I'm lucky. It is something that honestly I don't really like look for, and every once in a while a book will pop across my radar that fits into the Western genre, but this year I wanted to make a little bit more of an effort. So I have Valentine by Elizabeth Wetmore. This is a book that is set in Odessa, Texas in 1976. Odessa stands on the cusp of the next great oil boom. While the town's men embrace the coming prosperity, its women intimately know and fear the violence that always seems to follow. This I've heard really good things about. It has that kind of little country town vibe. I think that this will be a really good book. And then I am going to do the thing. I have told myself a couple June on the Ranges in a row that I'm gonna read Lonesome Dove. This is one of my dad's favorite books. It's one that people rave about, and it's one that, I don't know, like I said, Westerns are not my primary genre. It's a really big, thick book. So I've just I always intend to read it and kind of never get to it. So this year we are for sure doing Lonesome Dove. This is a book written by Larry McMurty. It is considered a classic especially when you're talking about the Western genre and when you get into historical fiction as well. And the thing that I think is going to motivate me to read this year is that this crosses over both from June on the Range and into the next readathon that I'm going to be talking about. So let's just jump straight over into that and I can tell you what's going on there. My next readathon that I'm going to be talking about is Read Historical Fiction 2024, which is hosted by Shelly Swearingen at Shellyish. If you don't follow her, you should be, because her channel is just blowing up and she has such fantastic content. She's recently been reading a ton of historical fiction, and that inspired her to put together a historical fiction readathon. This is one of those types where you can either just read something from historical fiction, or she has some prompts for you if you want to try to do the whole thing. Of course, I can never do anything low-key, so I have to try to do the entire set of prompts. There are 8 of them, so let me talk to you about those books. So prompt number 1 is to read a historical fiction set in the country that you're from. I live in the United States. So I picked up All We Were Promised by Ashton Latimore. This is set in Philadelphia in 1837. When Charlotte escaped from the crumbling White Oaks plantation down south, she'd expected freedom to feel different from her former life as an enslaved housemaid. After all, Philadelphia is supposed to be the birthplace of American liberty. Instead, she's locked away, playing servant to her white passing father, as they both attempt to hide their identities from slave catchers who would destroy their new lives. Heard really good things about this. I picked this up from Book of the Month maybe like 4 months back and have been meaning to get to it. This fits perfectly with a historical fiction from the country I'm from. Next up is to read a historical fiction set in a country different from the one that you're from. So I decided that I was going to read Homegoing by Yaa Gyasi. So this is a book that is set in Ghana. We have 2 half-sisters, Effia and Essie. They're both born in different villages in 18th century Ghana. Effia is married off to an Englishman and lives in comfort in the palatial rooms of a Cape Coast castle. Unbeknownst to Effia, her sister Essie is imprisoned beneath her in the castle's dungeon, sold with thousands of others into the Gold Coast booming slave trade, and shipped off to America, where her children and grandchildren will be raised in slavery. I have heard so many fantastic things about this book. I can't think of a single review that I've ever heard of this book where someone was like, it was just okay, or it wasn't that good. This is a book that has rotated in and out of my TBR for a really long time, and for various reasons, I keep not being able to get to it. So this book is for sure getting read this month. I have been wanting to read it for the longest time, and we're gonna finally do it. Prompt number 3 is to read a historical fiction that is set in a new to you time period. So this is a little tricky because I read books set in all sorts of time periods. I don't really have a new to me time period. The one that I've picked out is set in a time period where I feel like I haven't read a ton of books, but in a specific like moment in time that I don't know that much about, and I don't think I've read a book with this particular topic. So I picked up As Bright as Heaven by Susan Meissner. 1918 Philadelphia is a city teeming with promise. Even as its young men go off to fight in the Great War, there are opportunities for a fresh start on its cobblestone streets. Into this bustling town come Pauline Bright and her husband, filled with the hopes that they can now give their 3 daughters the chance at a better life. Their dreams are short-lived. Just months after they arrive, the Spanish flu reaches the shores of North America. As the pandemic claims more than 12,000 victims in their adopted city, Pauline and her family find themselves in a world that looks nothing like the one that they knew. So the Spanish flu is a subject that I don't think I've ever actually really read about. And then in terms of like war eras, like World War II, World War I, Vietnam, etc., I think World War I is probably the one where I've read the least amount of historical fiction. So while I have read some historical fiction set in this era, I definitely haven't read that much of it. And again, with that focus on the Spanish flu, this is pretty new. Prompt number 4 is to read a historical fiction with elements of magical realism in it. So I've decided I'm going to read The Cemetery of Untold Stories by Julia Alvarez. I have an early release audio copy of this book that I need to read and review, and so I figured that this would be perfect for that prompt. This book is about Alma, who inherits a small plot of land in the Dominican Republic, her homeland. She has an idea to create a graveyard for the manuscript drafts and revisions and the characters whose lives she's tried and failed to bring to life and who still haunt her. Alma wants her characters to rest in peace, but they have other ideas, and the cemetery becomes a mysterious sanctuary for their true narrative. This sounds so interesting to me. I love the idea of like killing your darlings and then literally burying them. I have read several books by Julia Alvarez before, and I'm really looking forward to getting into this one. Number 5 is to read a historical fiction from the perspective of an ordinary person. So I picked up The Great Divide by Cristina Henriquez. This is another book that I picked up from Book of the Month a few months back, and it's one that I am so excited about. This is set in Panama, and honestly, I feel like there's just not a lot of books that have come across my radar that are set in Panama. This is a country that I have personally visited and really, really loved. Such a rich culture and so much fun. And so I'm really excited with the idea of revisiting through a book. Francisco, a local fisherman who resents the foreign powers clamoring for a slice of his country, nothing is more upsetting than the decision of his son, Omar, to work as a digger in the excavation zone. But for Omar, whose upbringing was quiet and lonely, this job offers a chance to finally find connection. Ada Bunting is a bold 16-year-old from Barbados who arrives in Panama as a stowaway along thousands of other West Indians seeking work. When she sees a young man collapse after his grueling shift working on the canal, she rushes to his aid. John Oswald has dedicated his life to scientific research and journeyed to Panama with a single-minded pursuit of eliminating malaria. But now his wife Marion has fallen ill, and when he witnesses Ada's bravery and compassion, he hires her on the spot as a caregiver. This sounds super interesting. Again, a historical piece of time that I feel like hasn't been written about all that heavily, even though it's a really, really significant moment. I love the multi-POV and characters from different places. I can't wait to dive into this. Number 6 is to read a work of historical fiction from the perspective of an extraordinary person. So this is also going to cross over onto my Pride reading list, and that is The New Life by Tom Crew. In London, in the summer of 1894, John Addington and Harry Ellis began collaborating on a book arguing that what they call sexual inversion is natural, harmless, and should be decriminalized. John is a wealthy scholar with 3 grown daughters and a wife named Catherine, who has come to accept his attraction to men, but can barely resign herself to his relationship with a working-class printer named Frank. Henry is young and progressive, a member of the forward-thinking Society of New Life, and he and his wife Edith intend to have a new, freer kind of marriage. When Oscar Wilde is arrested, just before John and Henry's book is to be published, each man must decide whether to risk ostracism and jail, as well as the happiness of those they love, or give up on the project. So this sounds fantastic. I've heard really good things about this. I received this from Aardvark quite a long time ago. They sent me a complimentary box with a handful of curated selections, and this is one of the books that they picked out for me. And I feel like this is kind of spot on for me. This fits into type of books that I like to read. So I think that this fits in that extraordinary person category for the historical readathon, and of course it crosses over to my Pride TBR. Prompt number 7 is to read a work of historical mystery or historical romance. So if you've been following my channel for a while, you know that I am not really a romance reader. I don't mind it as like a minor subplot, but I'm typically never going to read a book with that as a focus. So I leaned into the mystery element. I actually like historical mystery so much that I have 2 books and I couldn't decide which one I wanted to read more, so I just said, whatever, I'm gonna read both of them. First up is The House in the Orchard by Elizabeth Brooks. This is set in World War II, and a widow inherits a dilapidated English estate. She uncovers a diary written by an adolescent girl named Maud Gower. Looking for answers, she begins reading, only to unravel more questions about the mysterious past and many secrets hidden deep within the walls of Orchard House. I've heard really good things about this. This has been on my TBR for a bit, and so I'm looking forward to getting into it. And then my second historical mystery is The House is on Fire by Rachel Beanland. Richmond, Virginia, 1811. It's the height of the winter social season, and many of Virginia's elite have made the long journey to the capital in hopes of whiling away the darkest days of the year. At the city's only theater, the Placid and Green Company puts on a play for a populace that's done looking for enlightenment at the front of a church. When the theater goes up in flames in the middle of the performance, Sally, Cecily, Jack, and Gilbert make a series of split decisions that will not only affect their own lives, but those of countless others. And in the days following the fire, the paths of these 4 people will become forever entwined. I have heard rave reviews about this book as well. Everybody that's commented on it in the past when I've talked about it has said that it's so good. So I definitely want to make sure this is on my historical fiction TBR as well. And now we're going to take it back to June on the Range for just a moment, and prompt number 8 on this historical fiction readathon is to read a work of classic historical fiction. And so that's why I feel like I gotta read Lonesome Dove this year, because it fits for June on the Range and it also fits this prompt right here. It is classic historical fiction. Let me know in the comments if you've read Lonesome Dove and how you felt about it. For some reason, this book just makes me a little bit nervous. You know, it's a genre I don't read a lot. It's a massive book. It's epic. So tell me all about it. Get me hyped up. And now we're gonna get into the largest chunk of my TBR, and that is the books that I'm planning to read for Pride. I look forward to June every single year, not only because of my birthday, but because I really enjoy the TBRs that I put together for Pride. This usually ends up being one of my best reading months of the year, and so I'm really excited this year. I have some fantastic fantastic reads on this list. We're going to be talking about a lot of books. This is a sizable stack. However, keep in mind that a lot of these reads are very short. I have some horror novellas and short story collections and things that I think I should be able to burn through pretty quickly. So let's get right into it. So first up, I have A Place of Our Own, 6 Spaces That Shaped Queer Women's Culture by June Thomas. This is a book that I recently received from Seal Press. If you're unfamiliar with Seal Press, they are an imprint that publishes basically mostly nonfiction, and while they do post some historical nonfiction, a lot of their focus is on current issues, social activism, social justice, things like that. I am one of their ambassadors, so that means that every quarter they send me an email with their list of books that they're publishing that quarter, and I get to pick the ones that sound interesting to me. This was one of the ones that they sent, and it sounds fascinating. For as long as queer women have existed, we've created gathering grounds where we can be ourselves. From the intimate darkness of the lesbian bar to the sweaty camaraderie of the softball field, these spaces are a necessity for queer women defining identities. In A Place of Our Own, journalist June Thomas invites readers to explore the decades-long history of 6 iconic lesbian spaces, including the rural commune, the sex toy boutique, the vacation spot, and the feminist bookstore. I'm looking forward to learning more about the history of lesbians and queer spaces. Then I have Darling by Kay Ancrum. This is a book that's been on my TBR for a long time, and this is a queer Peter Pan retelling. On Wendy Darling's first night in Chicago, a boy called Peter appears at her window. He's dizzying, captivating, beautiful, so she agrees to join him for a night on the town. Wendy thinks they're heading to a party, but instead they're soon running in the city's underground. She makes friends, a punk girl named Tinkerbell and the lost boys Peter watches over, and she makes enemies, the terrifying Detective Hook, and maybe Peter himself. As his sinister secrets start coming to light, can Wendy find the courage to survive this night and make sure that everyone else does too? I've never really heard anything about this book, but I really enjoy like fairy tale retellings, especially when they have that like kind of dark, gritty edge to them. I am looking forward to this. This is a pretty short book, so I think I should be able to get through this relatively quickly. Then I have Thirst by Marina Yusek. This is translated by Heather Cleary, and Marina is from Argentina, and honestly, Argentinian literature has been on fire the last couple years. I read Our Share of Night recently, which I really enjoyed. I have Tender as a Flesh on my TBR for next month, which is a book I think I'm gonna really enjoy. And so I picked up this one hoping that the luck of the Argentinian authors would continue. Across 2 different time periods, 2 women, 1 vampire, 1 mortal, confront a yearning that will not let them rest. A breakout genre-blurring novel from an exciting new voice of Latin America's feminist gothic. Let me just tell you that everything about this book sounds like it's right up my alley. The vampires, the gothic horror, Argentinian author, translated fiction, like queer relationships, just everything in this book screams that this is a Caitlin book. So I am really hoping this one works for me. And then I have Homesick Stories by Nino Cipri. This is a book that was actually recommended to me on a indie bookstore crawl in San Diego. At every bookstore I go, I tend to ask like the people working for their recommendations, and I usually ask them to recommend something that's not super well known because I already kind of have the pulse of new releases and like really popular fiction. So I want to hear about the things that I might be missing. And one of the booksellers that I spoke to at Galaxy Bookstores in San Diego recommended this particular collection of short stories. I noticed that on the top it says, deliciously queer and dark and playful, Cipri is a treasure, from Carmen Maria Machado, author of Her Body and Other Parts. I feel like that is a pretty powerful recommendation there. This is dark, irreverent, and wonderfully unbelievable. The 9 speculative stories in Homesick meditate on the theme of home and our estrangement from it, and what happens when the family suddenly shifts into the uncanny. In stories that foreground queer relationships and transgender or non-binary characters, Cipri delivers the origin story for a superhero team comprised of murdered girls, a house cleaner discovering an impossible ocean in her least favorite client's house, a man haunted by keys that appear suddenly in his throat, and a team of scientists and activists discovering the remains of a long extinct species of intelligent weasel. This sounds fantastic. I have been on just a wonderful ride with short story collections lately. I know a lot of people don't seem to love them, but I have seriously read, maybe in the last year and a half I've started diving into short stories. I have read so many 4- and 5-star short story collections, and I'm hoping that's just going to continue with this here. I expect this to be pretty good. This is also relatively short. I don't even think it's a full 100 pages. So I should be able to get through it really quickly. And then I have What Night Brings by Carla Trujillo. So in that same indie bookstore haul, I went to Libellula Books in Chicano Park in San Diego, which is like my favorite bookstore in San Diego, by the way, in case you're ever there. They have just a fantastic mix of books, and their focus is books that have like current themes, things that like really have deep impact. And so I pretty much go there and just ask them to recommend books for me. And this is what I got this time. Maria Cruz wants God to do two things: change her into a boy and get rid of her father. What Night Brings is the unforgettable story of Marcy's struggles to find and maintain her identity against all odds, a perilous home life, an incomprehensible church, and a largely indifferent world. So the bookseller that gave me this recommendation described this as a modern classic in queer literature. This book was published in 2003, and I have never read this author before. It wasn't a title that I was familiar with, but it sounds really good. And honestly, Libellula never ever steers me wrong, so I'm looking forward to jumping into this. And another recommendation from Libellula bookstore in that exact same day, it was Fat Ham by James Ijames. So this is a queer Black retelling of Shakespeare's Hamlet. This is about Juicy, a young queer Southern man who is grappling with questions of identity and then is visited by the ghost of his father Pap at his mother's wedding and family barbecue. Pap demands that Juicy avenge his recent murder. How will Juicy, a sensitive and self-aware young Black man trying to break a cycle of trauma and toxic masculinity, avenge his father's premature death? Fat Ham reinvents Shakespeare's masterpiece in startling and hilarious ways amidst the backdrop of a family barbecue in the American South. So this sounds really unique to me. I haven't really delved into Shakespeare retellings too much, and that's mainly because most of the Shakespeare that I read was in school when I was forced to read it in an environment where it didn't inspire a lot of curiosity. I have revisited some of it via plays and stuff as an adult during my travels, but as far as reading actual retellings, I really haven't delved into it that much. So I'm very excited to check this out. It is actually written in play format. I think this is a really cool twist on the original. And then I have Manhunt by Gretchen Felker-Martin. I don't know what it is about this cover, but it freaks me out so much. I know that these are blueberries on the front and that there's just a bite taken out of it, but something about this cover really freaks me out. Beth and Fran spend their days traveling the ravaged New England coast, hunting feral men and harvesting their organs in a gruesome effort to ensure they'll never face the same fate. Robbie lives by his gun and one hand-learned motto, other people aren't safe. After a brutal accident entwines the three of them, this found family of survivors must navigate murderous turfs, a sociopathic billionaire bunker brat, and awkward relationship dynamics, all while outrunning packs of feral men and their own demons. So this is a book that came onto my radar during Trans Girl April 2 years back. This was a recommendation for that specific readathon, and I've heard nothing but good things from multiple people who have read this. I think it's going to be a little bit bloody and gory, which sometimes isn't my favorite, but I do love a thriller, horror, dystopian sort of a novel, and I'm hoping that this one really hits home for me. Then I have Tell Me I'm Worthless by Alison Rumfitt. This is another book that I've been hearing an awful lot about. I understand it to be a transgender horror story. So 3 years ago, Alice spent one night in an abandoned house with her friends Illa and Hannah. Since then, Alice has lived in a haunted existence, selling videos of herself for money, going to parties she hates, and drinking herself to sleep. Memories of that night torment Alice, but when Illa asks her to return to the house, she knows that she must go. I have heard kind of mixed reviews on this. Some people seem to love it, and some people kind of seem to find it a little bit boring. I'm hoping I am going to love it. And then the book that I am possibly the most excited about on this entire TBR, and let me tell you, this TBR is stacked with good reads. Her Body and Other Parties by Carmen Maria Machado. So in her electrifying debut, Carmen Maria Machado blithely demolishes the borders between psychological realism and science fiction, comedy and horror, fantasy and fabulism. Here are 8 startling stories that map the realities of women's lives and the violence visited upon their bodies. Earthy and otherworldly, antic and sexy, queer and caustic, comic and deadly serious. Her Body and Other Parties enlarges the possibility of contemporary fiction. So I have heard nothing but rave reviews about this story. Now, maybe it is the circle of booktubers that I follow. Maybe it's just that this book is that good, but honestly, people keep telling me how fantastic this book is. I actually found this in that same video with all of those other book recommendations. I found this at Libellula Books as well. And I picked it up, and the bookseller that had recommended those other 2 books was like, oh my gosh, that one is so amazing. If you haven't read it yet, definitely go for it. Can't rave about it enough. So I'm very hyped for this one. And then I have a book by an author who I'm giving it a second chance to. So I have Bolla by Pashtim Statojci. I'm so sorry if I've butchered the pronunciation of this. I'm not sure what the correct pronunciation is. I recently read his other book, My Cat Yugoslavia, and it was one of the strangest books I think I've read in a long time. There were parts of it that I really liked, but there were elements of it that I'm not sure I all the way got, and it felt like a book that was maybe a little bit smarter than I am. I have had Bolla on my shelves for a couple years, and I've been meaning to get to it. It sounds really fantastic. April 1995, our sim is a 24-year-old recently married student at the University of Cristina in Kosovo, keeping his head down to gain a university degree in a time and place deeply hostile to Albanians. In a cafe, he meets a young man named Milos, a Serb. Before the day is out, everything has changed for both of them, and within a week, 2 milestones erupt in Arsim's married life. His wife announces her first pregnancy, and he begins a life in secret. So this sounds really fantastic to me. This is a book that called to me immediately when I first found it, and I don't know why I haven't got to it yet. I think it's just, you know, it sometimes gets lost in the millions of books that I have on my shelves, but I'm hoping to really enjoy this one. I'm hoping it's maybe slightly more approachable than My Cat Yugoslavia, but we'll see. And then I have Feed Them Silence by Lee Mandelo. So Mandelo is a trans author, and he writes a lot of like horror and speculative fiction focused on his trans experience. What does it mean to be in kind with a non-human animal, or in Dr. Sean Kell-Ludin's case, to be in kind with one of the last remaining wild wolves? Using a neurological interface to translate her animal subject's perception through her own mind, Sean intends to chase both her scientific curiosity and her secret lifelong desire to experience the intimacy and freedom of wolfishness, to see the world through animal eyes, smell the forest thick with olfactory messages, even taste the blood and viscera of a fresh kill, and above all, to feel the belonging of a pack. I picked this up in that same indie bookstore crawl. I got this from Galaxy Books. That's the same place that I got Manhunt and Homesick. That indie bookstore crawl was honestly fantastic for queer literature. Then I have a couple of nonfiction titles, both of which came from Seal Press over the last couple years, and I'm hoping to catch up on them. So we have Before We Were Trans, A New History of Gender by Kit Hayam. Today's narrative about trans people tend to feature individuals with stable gender identities that fit neatly into categories of male or female. Those stories, while important, fail to account for the complex realities of many trans people's lives. Before We Were Trans illuminates the stories of people across the globe, from antiquity to the present, whose experiences of gender defy binary categories. So this is definitely an area where I feel like personally I need to do a lot more learning. I understand gender fluidity, I understand the idea of gender as a spectrum, but I don't have that much personal experience with it. And so I would like to learn more about non-binary identities and gender fluid identities. I'm really excited to get into this book. Also from Seal Press, I have Please Miss, A Heartbreaking Work of Staggering Penis by Grace Lavery. Lights up on Grace Lavery, reformed druggie, unreformed omnisexual chaos muppet, and 100% all-natural synthetically cultivated female hormone monster. As soon as she solves her penis problem, she begins receiving anonymous letters, seemingly sent by a cult of sinister clowns, and set out on a magical mystery tour to find the source of these surreal missives. Of course, what recently transitioned, recently sober Grace is looking for in this hall of mirrors is herself. So I've heard kind of mixed reviews on this one. I have heard that the writing style of this book is a little bit chaotic and sometimes hard for people to relate to. But I've also heard that it is really interesting and unique, and I'm really looking forward to getting into it. Then I have Alice, Sadie, and Celine by Sarah Blakely Cartwright. It's opening night, but Alice's performance in the local Bay Area production of The Winter's Tale is far from glamorous. She doesn't have dreams of stardom, but the basement theater in her wildfire-choked home isn't exactly what she envisioned for her career back in Los Angeles. To make matters worse, her best friend Sadie is not even coming. Pragmatic, serious Sadie and flighty, creative Alice have been best friends since high school, really each other's only friends. But now they are through with college, which they attended together, and living on opposite ends of California. Alice would at least expect Sadie's support. Sadie, determined not to cancel her plans with her boyfriend, ends up enlisting the help of her mother, Celine. A professor of women's and gender studies, Celine is notorious for her landmark treatise on sex and identity, but she's struggling to write her new book in a post-second wave feminist world. So when Sadie begs her to attend Alice's play, she relents, if only to escape her writer's block. But in a turn of perplexing events, Celine becomes entranced by Alice's performance and realizes that her daughter's once lanky, slightly annoying best friend is now an irresistible young woman. I've heard pretty good things about this. I picked this up from Book of the Month a few months back, and I am excited to get into it. Next up, I have a book that's been on my TBR for a long time, and that is Less by Andrew Sean Greer. This is a winner of the Pulitzer Prize, which I think is really interesting because this is listed as like a humorous book or a comedy, and I feel like a lot of times comedies don't really get recognition with prize awards, so I'm really interested to get into this one. Who says you can't run away from your problems? You're a failed novelist about to turn 50. A wedding invitation arrives in the mail. Your boyfriend of the past 9 years is engaged to someone else. You can say it, yes, it would be too awkward, and you can't say it, no, it would look like defeat. On your desk are a series of invitations to half-baked literary events around the world. Question, how do you arrange to skip town? answer. You accept them all. So this sounds like a really fun premise for this book. I feel like it's going to explore some deep themes and probably explore how to kind of reinvent yourself or reconnect with yourself after a serious heartbreak. I'm really looking forward to this. Then I have The Great Believers by Rebecca Makkai. This is a National Book Award finalist, and I've heard a lot of great things about this particular book. In 1985, Yael Tishman, the development director for a Chicago art gallery, is about to pull off an amazing coup by bringing in an extraordinary collection of 1920s paintings. Yet as his career begins to flourish, the carnage of the AIDS epidemic grows around him. One by one, his friends are dying, and after his close friend Nico's funeral, the virus circles closer and closer to Yael himself. Soon, the only person he has left is Fiona, Nico's little sister. I've heard that this is super emotional. I am really looking forward to getting into this. This is also a piece of historical fiction that I feel like I don't know as much about. I mean, I am definitely somewhat familiar with the AIDS epidemic, but I haven't read as much about it as I would like, and especially in terms of historical fiction. Then I have Honey Girl by Morgan Rogers. This is a book that's been on my TBR for quite a long time, and I'm excited to finally get to it. With her newly completed PhD in astronomy in hand, Grace Porter goes on a girls' trip to Vegas to celebrate. She's a straight A, hardworking, high achiever. She's not the kind of person who goes to Vegas and gets drunkenly married to a woman whose name she doesn't know, until she does exactly that. This sounds like it could be a fun read, and living here in Vegas, I'm actually kind of excited to read a book that's set in my city. 5 books left to go. I know it's a lot. I'll Give You the Sun by Jandy Nelson. This was a Stonewall Honor book and a Michael Prince Award for Excellence in Young Adult Literature. Jude and her twin brother Noah are incredibly close. At 13, isolated Noah draws constantly and is falling in love with the charismatic boy next door, while daredevil Jude cliff dives and wears red lipstick and does the talking for the both of them. But 3 years later, at 16, Jude and Noah are barely speaking. Something has happened to wreck the twins in different and dramatic ways. I've heard really good things about this book. I don't read a whole ton of young adult fiction, but I'm not averse to it either. I'm just very selective about the books that I do read within this category. And this is one that I have heard a lot of really good things about. I am feeling very optimistic about reading it. And this was actually a gift from a lovely friend of mine over on Bookstagram, Carly Sunshine, who sent this to me after my last dog, Gibson, passed away. It was like a little pick-me-up, and it's been sitting on my shelf. It's a very well-loved and treasured book, even though I haven't read it yet. And so I'm really looking forward to seeing what it's about. Next up are 2 books that kind of go together. One of them I'm going to listen to on audiobook, and then one of them I have a physical copy of. So first up, I'm going to be listening to Shuggie Bain on audiobook. That is by Douglas Stewart, and it is a book that gets rave reviews. And then I'm going to follow it up with Young Mungo by Douglas Stewart. And this is a story of queer love and working class families. Young Mungo is a brilliant second novel from the Booker Prize winning author of Shuggie Bain. So I've heard rave reviews about both of these books, and I'm really hoping that I enjoy them. I think I'm gonna try to do them back to back and kind of get the full experience all at once. Then I'm gonna read The Danish Girl by David Ebershoff. I am slowly trying to incorporate a little bit more of classic fiction into my reading here and there. It is definitely not my favorite type of reading, but I do recognize there are probably a lot of really good classics out there. I just haven't been exposed to them. And this is one that I feel like is a classic piece of queer literature, so I would like to get to it this month. It starts with a question, a simple favor asked of a husband by his wife on an afternoon chilled by Baltic wind while both are painting in their studio. Her portrait model has canceled, and would he mind slipping into women's shoes and stockings for a few moments so that she can finish the painting on time? Of course, he answers, anything at all. With that, one of the most passionate and unusual love stories of the 20th century begins. Inspired by the true story of Danish painter Einar Wegner and his California-born wife, this tender portrait of marriage asks, what do you do when someone you love wants to change? Einar dresses more and more as Lily, the name given to her by Greta, and what started off as a game becomes a way of life for Greta and Einar. With Lily as her muse, Greta's paintings begin to flourish. A French art dealer spots her work, and the couple moves to Paris for the sake of Greta's career. In the permissive air of Paris, between the wars, Lily is liberated and increasingly becomes Greta's companion on public outings. This sounds really fantastic, and I am looking forward to diving into it. And then another book that's been on my TBR for a good long time is Memorial by Brian Washington. Benson and Mike are 2 young guys who live together in Houston. Mike is a Japanese-American chef at a Mexican restaurant, and Benson's a black daycare teacher, and they've been together for a few years, good years, but now they're not sure that they're still a couple. There's the sex, sure, and the meals Mike cooks for Benson, and well, they love each other. But when Mike finds out his estranged father is dying in Osaka, just as his acerbic mother, Mitsuko, arrives in Texas for a visit, Mike picks up and flies across the world to say goodbye. In Japan, he undergoes an extraordinary transformation, discovering the truth about his family and his past. Back home, Mitsuko and Benson are stuck living together as unconventional roommates, an absurd domestic situation that leads Benson to a deeper understanding of family and himself. Benson begins to push outward, realizing he might just know what he wants out of life and have the goods to get it. Heard good things about this. I am looking forward to finally reading it. And my last book is The Knockout Queen by Ruthie Thorpe. Bunny Lampert is the princess of North Shore, beautiful, tall, blonde, with a rich real estate developer father and a swimming pool in her backyard. Michael, who has a ponytail down his back and a septum piercing, lives with his aunt in the cramped stucco cottage next door. When Michael is caught smoking in Bunny's side yard, he discovers her life is not as perfect as it seems. At 6'3", Bunny towers over their classmates. Even as she dreams of standing out and competing in the Olympics, she is desperate to fit in, to seem normal, and to get a boyfriend, all while hiding her father's escalating alcoholism. Michael has secrets of his own. At home and at school, Michael pretends to be straight, but at night he tries to understand himself by meeting men online for anonymous encounters that both thrill and scare him. So it's kind of fitting that I'm reading this particular book this month because I just picked up Ruthie Thorpe's next book from Book of the Month. They featured it this month, and so it was one of my selections. So I will finish this one up just in time to get her next book. I also have a ton of audiobooks on my NetGalley shelf right now, many of them that fit the various themes of the month. So I may pop one or two of them in as I have time through the month. Now, we always have this discussion at the end of my TBR videos where you're probably like, Caitlin, you've picked way too many books. There's like 30 of them there. Nobody has that much time. You're right. I don't usually read all of the 30 books that I pick out every single month, but it kind of helps me because it gives me a balance of focusing on the themes that are important to me in each individual month and allowing me some space to mood read what is sounding appealing on that specific TBR. And aside from that, this month I am currently stuck at home. I am recovering from a surgery that I had last month, so I'm out of work for the entire month. That means I have like 5 weeks to read as many books as I possibly can. And so I think that I should be able to move through a pretty significant amount of this TBR. And also, again, especially in this pile here, a lot of these books are really short, and I feel like I should be able to get through them really fast. So I'm feeling very optimistic about my reading for June, even though, as always, I've picked out way more than I can possibly get to. So we're at the end of the video. If you like it, hit the thumbs up, comment down below. Let me know what you think of my TBR, what books you've read on here. Tell me all about them. Did you love them? Did you hate them? Or are there any books on here that I've mentioned that you're really excited to read? Just tell me all of the things. Let me know what you're reading in June as well. Are you focused on Pride? Are you participating in any of the great readathons? You just mood reading whatever you feel like? Tell me all of the things. And if you're not already subscribed to this channel, you know what to do. Hit the subscribe button down below, as well as the notification bell so that you never miss a video, and that way we can see each other again soon. Thanks so much for joining. Bye.